You probably think, I would never fall into a cult. And I truly hope that's the case. However, don't assume that people who do fall into one are foolish or uneducated. It's a well-established fact among scholars of the phenomenon that many cults include people with university degrees, even postgraduate education. So how do they manage to do it? What could possibly be appealing about a cult that makes people want to join? Stay until the end, because in this video, we'll answer that question by drawing on the famous magazine of Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower Study Edition, in its most recent issue, March 2026. And yes, I know it's still December, but the March issue is already out. Inexplicable things about Jehovah's Witnesses. By the end of the video, you'll be able to identify several of the techniques they use to attract even the most intelligent people. So let's get started. Let's talk about the first method the magazine mentions. Talk to people about their concerns and sufferings. Let's begin with this illustration. Observe it carefully while I read the caption to you. Let us try to understand the concerns of the people we teach and learn to take an interest in them. See paragraph 4. The illustration is very telling. The young woman holding a cup is thinking about the concerns of the people she is preaching to. First, we see a young mother who is suffering domestic violence, along with her child. Then we see a young woman smoking. She looks somewhat like the young mother, but it's not clear whether she's the same person. What is clear is that something is troubling her. Finally, we see an elderly woman with a doctor. Apparently, she is not receiving good news. Then paragraph 4, which the caption refers to, mentions that everyone suffers for one reason or another. It says that some may be worried because of recent news, that some parents may be concerned about safety in schools, or about unemployment. To me, the message is quite clear. Talk to people about what worries them. Talk to them about their suffering, about their anguish. What still strikes me as hypocritical, however, is that the caption encourages witnesses to learn to take an interest in people's concerns. Can we really talk about genuine interest in people when the ultimate goal is to persuade them to join their religion? Listen to the people. All of us have, at some point, felt the relief that comes from talking about our worries. It's not that doing so solves them, but somehow it makes us feel better. But how would you feel if the person you're sharing your concerns with suddenly interrupts you and starts talking about themselves, about their achievements, or their own problems? Well, the next technique used by Jehovah's Witnesses has to do precisely with that. Look at this illustration. We see the girl who was smoking in the previous image, but now she's the one speaking, while the young Jehovah's Witness is listening. Now we understand why. In the earlier illustration, it wasn't clear what the girl's problem was. It wasn't clear because, at that point, the young witness didn't yet know what her concern was. But in this illustration, it's clear that the young Jehovah's Witness has succeeded in getting the other girl to express herself. The caption reads, "Good teachers speak little and listen much," paragraphs 11 and 12. And in paragraph 12, Jehovah's Witnesses are explicitly encouraged to ask questions and be patient, giving people enough time to respond while avoiding talking too much. It's clear that this has a double effect. First, the Jehovah's Witness gets to learn what the person's concerns are, and second, the person feels heard and therefore assumes that the witness genuinely cares about them. But you're probably thinking right now, okay, but that doesn't actually solve people's problems. Maybe they feel temporary relief from talking about their issues, and maybe feeling heard makes them feel drawn to the group. But deep down, their worries are still there. That's true, and that's precisely where the next technique used by Jehovah's Witnesses comes in. To give hope. And I want to clarify this, because if your problem is that you don't have enough to eat, don't think the witnesses will be interested enough to help you in that way. In fact, unlike other churches, Jehovah's Witnesses do not engage in charity, but they are very skilled at offering people intangible hope. In the case of the magazine we're discussing, they turn to the book of Job. If you've read the Bible, you probably know that the story of Job is really an allegory that tries to explain why, if God is good, he allows suffering. To sum it up, the book of Job says that God allows the devil to cause suffering to Job, who was a very wealthy and respected man. The devil claims that Job will renounce God, while God tells the devil that Job will never turn against him. And indeed, even though the devil causes Job to lose all his wealth, brings about the death of his children, and afflicts him with a terrible disease, Job never curses God. In the end, as a reward, God restores Job's wealth, gives him more children, and returns his health. In fact, the cover of the Watchtower we're analyzing refers to the moment when God restores Job's prosperity, children, and health. With that illustration in mind, take a look at the following image from the magazine. In this one, we see 3 situations of suffering, while the caption reads, "Jehovah will bring an end to the suffering of his loyal servants." See paragraph 13. And indeed, paragraph 13 encourages Jehovah's Witnesses to remember Job's case, how God brought his suffering to an end as a reward for remaining faithful. And of course, the illustration of the paradise the witnesses have been waiting for more than 100 years couldn't be missing. And so, the Jehovah's Witness can dream that one day he will be like that young man peacefully reading under a tree, accompanied by a beautiful lion cub, living an endless life under those paradisiacal conditions. By the way, what he's reading looks suspiciously like the Bible. So I can't help but wonder, assuming that young man is now 5,000 years old, how many times has he read the Bible? Or is it some other kind of book? Will anyone be writing novels in the New World? And what could a novel be about in a world without suffering? Or maybe it's a book about nature. I also wonder which university published the book, and whether there will be printing presses in the New Order. How will they prevent the deforestation caused by making paper books? And well, I also see couples and children. If no one is dying, won't there be overpopulation? Apparently not, because everything looks very clean. Of course, to all my questions, a Jehovah's Witness will reply that God can do anything. And that brings us to what is known as a non-falsifiable argument. That is, I can't prove the claim false because it always falls back on a supernatural explanation. But in the end, the point here is that regardless of what problem the young woman in the illustration we see again here may have, the Jehovah's Witness will offer her hope. And yes, in a harsh world, people cling to whatever they can, even to the hope offered by a cult. But don't think the lessons from this magazine end here. Next, they offer a few little tips on how to keep people from leaving their organization. How will they keep you inside the cult? Now look at the following illustration while I read the caption to you. Despite the problems of this world, let us keep busy in spiritual activities. Any expert on cults will tell you that one technique they use to retain their followers is to keep them constantly busy. Let me tell you about all the activities the leaders of Jehovah's Witnesses keep their followers occupied with. Attending the Kingdom Hall twice a week. It's been many years since I last went to a witness meeting, but as far as I know, each meeting still lasts well over an hour and a half. On top of that, it's not exactly well regarded to rush out as soon as the meeting ends. Attendees are encouraged to stay and socialize with one another. Oh, but there's more. Any self-respecting witness carefully prepares for each meeting. For that purpose, their leaders provide the schedule for every meeting and the study material months in advance. Add to that the travel time, plus getting properly groomed, because unless you have an office job, you're not going to the meeting in your everyday clothes. All of this should give you a sense of how much time a witness invests just in attending meetings. But there's more. Of course, there's also going out to preach and conducting Bible studies. That alone can take up several hours a week, but we're still not done. Because in addition, Jehovah's Witnesses are expected to read what they call the daily text, which is separate from their daily Bible reading. And they are also expected to have personal and family study of Watchtower publications. And yes, we're still not done, because there are also the assemblies, which often last several days. On top of that, there are other assignments to attend to, ranging from cleaning the Kingdom Hall, assembly halls, and rented stadiums, to delivering presentations from the platform. And if you're a man and attain the so-called privilege of becoming a ministerial servant or an elder, or if you're a woman and commit to being a pioneer, meaning you devote a set number of hours to preaching each month, well, then the activities multiply exponentially. And all of this without even mentioning your secular obligations, studying, working, taking care of the home and the children. Oh, and if you're a loyal Jehovah's Witness, you're expected to give a good witness everywhere. That means that if you're a student, you must be a good student. If you work, you're expected to do so with excellence. And the same applies to caring for the home and the children. Do you see now what cult experts mean when they talk about keeping people busy? And of course, they couldn't resist capping off the advice about staying busy with spiritual activities with the following. Do you see the illustration? The caption reads, "Good judgment helps us not to be distracted by social media, entertainment, and recreation." This leads us to another characteristic of cults: control of information. Of course, stay busy with so-called spiritual activities, and whatever little time you have left, don't distract yourself with social media, entertainment, or leisure. That way, your mind stays captive. So, what do you think about the content of the new Watchtower? I'll be reading you in the comments. If you liked the content, leave a like and subscribe. And if you want to learn about more techniques Jehovah's Witnesses use to gain new followers, I'll leave you the next video. Bye.